Chapter 4. The state of the question of compulsion of conscience and toleration. The question touching liberty of conscience was never by us nor any man, save libertines themselves and ignorant Anabaptists, both of old and late, moved concerning internal liberty remaining within the soul, as liberty to think, understand, judge, conclude, whether the magistrate can force men with the sword to opinions, and cajole them out of some into other contrary judgments in the matters of God. For the magistrate cannot take on him, yea, nor the church, under the pain of censures, compel any to think well of Christ, or ill of Antichrist. Yet most of the senseless arguments of our times are drawn from the immediate subjection of the conscience to God, from the nature of conscience, religion, faith, fear, and the illicit acts of the soul, which cannot be compelled. Yea, in this meaning, we think God can neither offer violence to mind, understanding, will, or affections of love, fear, joy, because all these illicit acts cannot flow from any principle but the internal and vital inclinations of the soul, though the devils be said to believe against their will, yet not against the inclination of the understanding or desiring faculty. All the question is concerning the imperated acts, and these external, that is not touching opinions and acts of the mind, but that which is visible and audible in these opinions, to wit, the speaking, professed holding of them, publishing, teaching, printing, and known and external persuading of others to be of our mind. But that the question will come to this, whether the magistrate's sword be to regulate our words that concerns our neighbor, as that we lie not, we forswear not, to the hurt of the life and credit of our neighbor, that we slander not, rail upon no man, far less against the prince and ruler of the people, but whether the words we utter or publish of God, though never such blasphemies and lies, because they come from the conscience, as if truth or words we speak for or against our neighbor did not flow from a conscience either good or ill, be above or beyond all swords or coercive power of men. It is clear the question must be thus stated, for all the laws of the Old Testament, which we hold in their moral etiquette to be perpetual, that are touching blasphemies, heresies, solicitation to worship false gods, and the breach of which the godly magistrate was to punish, command, or forbid only such things as may be proved by 2 or 3 witnesses, and which husband and wife are not to conceal, and from which all Israel must abstain for fear of the like punishment. Deuteronomy 13, verses 8 through 11, Deuteronomy 17, verses 5 and 6, as well as Leviticus 20, verses 1 through 5. But opinions in the mind, acts of the understanding, can never be proved by witnesses, and such as neither magistrate nor church can censure. Then we refer to all the godly, if libertines and Anabaptists deal brotherly in affirming that Presbyterians persecute them because out of the tenderness of conscience they cannot come up to the light and judgment of their brethren in all opinions. Secondly, there is a toleration politic and civil and spiritual or ecclesiastic shame and fear in punishing heresies, either by the judge or the church, whether in civil or ecclesiastical censures, rebukes, excommunications, is an evil punishment in both, as is evident if we compare Judges 18, verse 7, where it is said, there was no magistrate in the land that might put them to shame in anything. Deuteronomy 13, verse 11, with these places that speak of spiritual censures in the fear and shame of them, as 1 Timothy 5, verse 19, receive not an accusation against an elder, but before 2 or 3 witnesses. Then an elder that is scandalous may incur shame of being accused. In Matthew 18, verse 17, let him be to thee as an heathen and a publican. 1 Timothy 5, verse 20. Them that sin rebuke before all, that others also may fear. So the avoiding of idolaters and heretics. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 11, Titus 2, verse 10, as well as 2 John 10, and Galatians 1, verse 8, brings public shame on them. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 14. Then look what forcing power the shame the magistrates can put heretics to, and what compulsory influence it hath on the conscience, and so should not be inflicted on men for their conscience and holding of heresies, as libertines say. The same compulsory power hath conical rebukes of pastors or private Christians, and of admonition, excommunication, or the avoiding of the society of false teachers, either by the whole church or by private Christians, and the arguments proving the magistrate cannot punish for conscience in his politic sphere, do also prove that heretics should be rebuked sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, contrary to Titus 1:13, and that we should neither admonish them nor avoid their company, which is absurd, so they be more ingenious. Libertines who free false teachers and heretics both from civil and ecclesiastical censures, than these who free them from civil and subject them to ecclesiastical censures. For ecclesiastical compulsion hath no more influence on the conscience by way of teaching than politic or civil, and the arguments taken from the nature and conscience is as strong to prove that the church of Pergamus, Ephesus, Thyatira should suffer liars, false apostles, and seducers, such as hold the doctrine of Balaam, and Jezebel, the deceiving prophetess, who teach and profess according to their erroneous conscience, contrary to Revelations 1, verses 2, 3, 14, and 20, as that the godly prince should suffer them. Nor can it be said that church censures are spiritual punishments, and so work on the Spirit, and have instructing, rebuking, and exhorting going before. But the sword is a bodily punishment, and hath not instructing going before. For I answer, though these two punishments differ, yet they agree that formally both are alike, compulsory of the conscience, and neither of them act upon the Spirit by teaching and instructing as the Word doth. For as excommunication of a heretic should have instructing and convincing going before, so should also the magistrate presuppose, before he strike with the sword, that the false teacher hath been instructed and convinced, and so he doth formally punish him with the sword for his pertinacious perverting of souls. Thirdly, nor can it be replied that men should not be punished for either opinions, or for holding opinions that flow from mere conscience, when they publish, preach, and print them from no principle, but mere conscience, or for gain, or a morsel of bread, or for preferment in the state or army. To this I answer, lay aside opinions and answer me this: how the judges that are for liberty of conscience are not to punish some words, except they would be guilty of persecution, to wit, such as these: the Trinity is but a fiction. Christ is no more God than another holy man. Yea, Christ was but an impostor. And yet they punish words and deeds of the same kind that come from mere conscience. The answer must be, the former words are from mere conscience, and the publishers thereof will swear they hold them as the mere enforcing light and judgment of their conscience. But these other words and deeds which the magistrate censures are not from mere conscience. But I believe these that acted in the late controverted Parliament, and by virtue thereof, yea, and many godly men of them that are punished by the judges, and many of the godly that fled for fear, act from mere conscience, and will swear they did so act according to their sworn covenant, and to prevent a new war, and that they did it neither for gain nor for preferment in state or army. And if it were referred to the consciences of most of the army, why they disbanded not when the Parliament commanded them, but do by their practices treat a war to themselves and the land, a judgment of God of all others the saddest, when they have none to fight against but shadows and enemies of straw and hay. I judge they would swear that they judged the charge of the houses against their conscience and unjust, and that they hold up wars out of mere conscience, and to vindicate the oppressed subjects, and for preventing of a new war, and not for gain or preferment. So the question is not yet answered, why some external actions or words and deeds, coming from mere conscience without any carnal pretext, as they will swear, cannot be punished, but violence must be done to conscience, so the men persecuted, and others that do the like and speak the like from no principle but pure conscience, without any carnal pretext, as they will swear, are punished, and yet neither violence is done to conscience, nor the men persecuted, for acting according to conscience and a sworn covenant. But they justly punished, if acting from mere conscience be the formal cause why men are not to be punished, it should hold in all such acts. Number 4. They seem to me sick in the brain, who hold that it is an act of love and charity in the magistrates to restrain Arminianism, Socinianism, etc., and to discountenance such seducers, and yet bring arguments against all external force in matters of religion or compulsion in general. A discountenancing and a keeping of men from places, dignities, offices is the highest compulsion of penalty you can devise. What arguments fight against any compulsion of the magistrate, positive or negative, doth fight against all? If it be lawful for the magistrate, as for all other men, to do all he can for the truth, as some say, and the magistrate's invitations, recommendation, exemplary profession, general tuition, excluding, coercing, are all nothing but words, these agree to all Christians as Christians, and are nothing peculiar to the magistrate as a magistrate cannot request. He must command as a magistrate, and all his commands, if disobeyed, are in order to the sword. Fifthly, the question is not whether religion can be enforced upon men by the magistrate by the dint and violence of the sword, or only persuaded by the power of the word. We hold with Lactantius that religion cannot be compelled, nor can mercy and justice and love to our neighbor, commanded in the second table, be more compelled than faith in Christ. Hence, give me leave to prove two things. Number 1, that religion and faith cannot be forced on men, and number 2, that this is a vain consequence. Religion cannot be forced, but must be persuaded by the word of Spirit. Ergo, the magistrate can use no coercive power in punishing heretics and false teachers. For the first, we lay hold on all the arguments that prove the word preached to be the only means of converting the soul, begetting of faith, and that carnal weapons are not able, yea, nor were they ever appointed of God, to dig down strongholds, nor can they make a willing people. And Lactantius said well, what is left to us if others lust extort that by force, which we must do willingly? And that of Tertullian, it is of the law or right of man, and of his natural power, that every man worships what he thinks he should worship. Nor doth the religion of one either do good or do evil to another man. Nor is it religion to compel religion, which ought to be received by will, not by force, since sacrifices of worship are required of a willing mind. In which I observe, number 1, or firstly, Tertullian speaks not of the true Christian religion, which is now in question, but of religion in general, as it is comprehensive of both true and false religion, because he speaks of that religion which the law of nature a man chooseth, and is humani juris and naturalis potentatis. But it is not of the law of man or natural power, nor in flesh and blood's power, to choose the true Christian religion, that election is supernatural faith, Tertullian there and elsewhere often, as also the Scripture, John 6, verse 44, as well as Matthew 16, verse 17, and Matthew 11, 25, 26, and 27. Secondly, religion is taken two ways. First, for the inward and outward acts of religion as seen both to God and man, as Lactantius, Tertullian, and others say. So it is most true. Christians ought not with force of sword compel Jews, or Jews or pagans compel Christians to be of their religion, because religion is not begotten in any by persuasion of mind, nor by forcing of the man. Again, religion is taken for the external profession and acting and performances of true religion within the church, or by such as profess the truth, that are obvious to the eyes of magistrates and pastors, and thus the sword is no means of God to force men positively to external worship or performances. But the sword is a means negatively to punish acts of false worship in those that are under the Christian magistrate and profess Christian religion, insofar as these acts come out to the eyes of men and are destructive to the souls of these in a Christian society. 'Tis even so, and not otherwise punishable by the magistrate. For he may punish omissions of hearing the doctrine of the gospel and other external performances of worship, as these omissions by ill example or otherwise are offensive to the souls of these that are to lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and holiness. Nor does it follow that the sword is a kindly means to force outward performances, for the magistrate as the magistrate does not command these outward performances as service to God, but rather forbids the omissions of them as destructive to man. For example, a physician commands fasting. Pastors, after the example of James, commands fasting when judgments are on us. The physician commands it, insofar as eating troubles the common society of humors, members, and tempers of the body, and the physician forbids eating so as he will have no more to do with the patient if he will disobey, and so trouble the temper of the body, which is the only object the physician works on.